Hello and welcome to Real Reflection, Cinema's Societal Mirror. I'm Kevin.
And I'm Chris.
And today we're going to be talking to you about horror films, but specifically a subgenre of meta horror films, where we're going to talk about two films that each of us have picked. Cabin in the Woods and...
Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, we'll talk about what we liked about these movies, but also we'll try to touch upon what these films show, right, about the world we live in, and some of the people and life that goes along with it. But yeah, let's start off. I don't know, maybe horror in general, like a little context before we move on. Do you want to talk about your experience with horror?
My experience?
Yeah, I'm sure it's brief and minimal.
Oh, yeah, no, there's no way I could fill like 2 hours just talking about it. I mean, yeah, I'm of the age where my introduction was through a lot of like 90s shows like Goosebumps, Are You Afraid of the Dark, and lots of kids' book series. For whatever reason, the 90s and even up to the early aughts was a real boom for like kid-centered like horror content. So I got into it through that, from a very young age, and then just kind of grew up with it. Just eventually stopped reading R.L. Stine, went right into Stephen King and Clive Barker, and just never really looked back. And I think, to kind of get into the topic of our genre pick today, meta horror, it's that horror has such a rich history with film. Like some of the earliest like film classics are horror films, Nosferatu. Even, I mean, one of the first short films Thomas Edison ever made was an adaptation of Frankenstein. So horror and cinema go hand in hand. They're very good friends. And I think it just makes sense that eventually over time you'd get filmmakers wanting to kind of poke fun or critique just the conventions of horror storytelling in that medium, in film. And that's where we get it,
Yeah, absolutely, because both of these films today, in their description, right, they're horror, but they're also listed as comedy, right? Like, and we do have those comedic elements in there. So there's definitely that poking fun at a genre you love. Similarly, yeah, right. Goosebumps, as a kid, like in second grade, had a pretty profound effect on me as well. Not only in terms of my literacy, right, but the introduction to the genre of horror. I was a really scared kid, and there was also something fun about that, So I reluctantly, begrudgingly, like my childhood was like facing fears through movies and stuff. Off mic, before we started, we talked about Chucky, right, and things like that. Clowns was a big one for me too.
Clowns,
I think it's uncanny valley stuff with a lot of it, but but I absorbed so much horror that I kind of became desensitized and numb to a lot of it. Something else I mentioned before, like jump scares, gore, right? Like it lost all effect in terms of like producing fear, being scary. But meta horror does do that for me, right? It does make me think and I'm like, worried, a little bit, like afraid watching, but that's also what's fun, So I'm happy that we are able to talk about these because they're different, I guess,
100%. Yeah. Their humor and their wit really kind of helps them stand out from the pack. And I think what helps make them the funny thing is that the humor and the sometimes almost whimsical tone at times in these films helps make it scarier because it lulls you into almost a false sense of security. You watch a movie like, Behind the Mask, and for those who haven't seen Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon, it is a horror mockumentary, a pseudo documentary from 2006, and it is ostensibly about a film crew, a very morally questionable film crew who meet up to record a professed like serial killer, because in the world of this film, Jason, Freddy, Michael Myers, all those classic horror villains, they're all real, they all exist, and this guy wants to be the next one. This guy, Leslie Vernon, has a tragic backstory. He's got all the markings of being an ex-horror icon, and he's been training for this for so many years. So they go to meet him as he's getting ready for his big, legacy-defining rampage, and the crew is very surprised to find this very charming and likable guy, very talkative dude who's willing to explain to them all the ins and outs of the process. And for most of the movie, he's like the actor. I'm going to look him up right now. Sorry, folks. To give you some slight, pause. Okay, Nathan Basil is the name of the actor. He plays Leslie Vernon, our titular anti-hero here, and he is so good at just seeming like a somewhat eccentric but still kind of real and normal guy who just has a thing he's very passionate about, and is just he's so bubbly and enthusiastic. He makes you kind of fall in love with it by the way he talks about it, the way he is staking out victims and all this stuff, or the way he talks about the cardio he's got to do to be an effective, chaser, like killer and everything. It's really interesting. It's fun.
Yeah, it totally, like, a lot of that behind the scenes stuff that the movie opens with, markets with, leads with, it serves to demystify like the slasher in this genre, but also like humanizes them a little bit. And like I agree, the killers that we are shown, right, whether it is Leslie or the mentor character, played Herschel on The Walking Dead, they're likable, they're charming, there's something endearing about them, and like you sort of let your guard down with that, and that's scary too, how charismatic these figures can be, so like I was definitely aware of that watching it, because as I said, right, like Leslie needed to grow on me, but it was a very short period of growth when I started this film. It was about 10 minutes in, and like I was on board with him as a character. So yeah, right. I thought that was really interesting. I think it also, like, we could probably touch upon the role of the audience or media and
for sure.
fascination with violence and killers and stuff like that. But, so the movie is different in terms of its first like 2 acts, but then I think ironically, maybe it's not 2 acts, right? But about halfway through the movie, I paused it. I don't know, like my battery on my computer died, and I was like, I was taking notes, and I was like, so here we are, and he's about to start, and we have half the movie left, and I'm ready for some kind of flip the script, and the second half of the movie does flip the script, where now we see that killing spree.
Yes.
We see that we get the slasher movie that has been promised, except our production crew is a part of the targeted victims as well.
Yeah.
They have to question how involved they want to get, right? In terms of cinema verite and all of that.
Yeah.
And ultimately, our main character, Taylor, chooses to try to warn the targets, and thus they become targets as well. And it's in that half of the movie where, in case you didn't realize what a monster these guys are, you see it, right? When Leslie is killing the overweight cameraman, that's when you get it. It's brutal, it's cold, and it doesn't flinch. And you see it, right? Like, he's not a nice guy. Like, it's an act, it's a mask, that we were being shown. And that hit, that death. Because one of the things I noticed was there wasn't a lot of blood and gore. The camera, cut away from a lot of the actual physical penetration of stabbing and stuff like that. And I noticed that, and I was like, is this PG-13, right? Popped up in my head at one point. So I thought that was interesting as well, but it's in that moment, right, where, and like they're likable, and also they make legitimate cases about the role of good and evil and how we need evil and stuff like that. And I'm sure we can get into that too if you want.
Oh yeah, no, it's definitely, because that's the thing. At one point, I feel like you're watching it for a while and you're like, so what? Why would one aspire to it? Why would you want to be this kind of psychomaniac? Because they're very honest about the fact that, there's not, like, if you do this stuff, there's not a lot like of choices for what's going to happen to you afterwards. You're either going to like get killed, you're going to maybe get arrested, or you're going to like just have to go into hiding for a while and maybe pop up every now and then. In other words, it's a very solitary life to be a psycho murderer.
Yeah.
And they're very upfront about that. Like when, you have Leslie talking with his mentor and everything. They're very open and honest about like how the toll it takes, but it's also because they do it because they believe like their role in society is to spread fear, to be the evil, the anti-force to everything that's good. I mean, Leslie pretty much explicitly says that at one point. And yeah, there's almost a point where it's like you wonder if he's even going to actually go through with it, because he seems like such a you just don't want him to, he's so likable, you don't want him to actually end up having to be evil, but then he does go through with it. He does start enacting his master plan. And yeah, like, you know, there's a lot there, especially over the last decade or so, where true crime podcasting and all that stuff and true crime in general had another big resurgence in popular culture.
Yeah.
There's a lot of debate around how ethical it is to consume those stories in like, you know, a mass paperback or movie fashion. And as someone who like grew up, like who like, especially in his high school, college years was, I say it like I don't listen to true crime podcasts now. Like somebody who loves true crime, I do sometimes have to like confront that and ask questions about that myself. But this film kind of in a way is trying to do that too, because you have this camera crew being very like kind of distant and even kind of being like rooting for Leslie for a while. And then it's just something about the raw reality of, oh, these are real people who are going to get hurt. It just kicks something into them, and there's just some default empathy that gets awakened. And yeah. I think if you're consuming true crime for the right reasons, I think you'll also find yourself empathizing. And I think if you nowadays the decent people like podcasts and everything that do discuss this stuff always kind of tend to focus on the stories of the victims and everything, and about how the killers who upend their lives are usually just pieces of shit. Mm-hmm. Or crap. I actually don't remember if this is.
Yeah, I thought about our language policy in preparation for this. I was like, I wonder. We haven't discussed that. I don't know.
Well, we.
So all right, thanks for ripping the Band-Aid off. I guess we'll find out.
If we go if we're trying to be PG, we'll just have to get a nice bleep in there, and that'll be that. And I'll just remember to behave for the future. But anyway,
I like one of those clown horns. I think that would be appropriate.
You know, it's funny. I actually was doing a TV cut of one of my short films because I'm going to submit it somewhere, and to actually be broadcast on TV, I was like, I didn't want to just cut the audio and just have it like, I wanted like an old school bleep sound, but then I decided to go with like the Metalocalypse way, and I used like guitar harmonics.
Yeah, nice.
Sorry, we're getting a little off topic, but yeah, to get back to what Leslie Vernon, I think, has to say about horror is that it really, it lovingly dissects the tropes and be like, yeah, some of this stuff's kind of silly, but this is why we love these movies. It's fun. It gives you that thrill. But then it kind of forces you to question. It's like, oh man, if you were in that scenario, would you actually try to be the hero? Would you try to save them? Would you, and you think you're so clever? Would you be able to go against all those bad tropes, or would you just end up playing right into them? You know?
And the answer the movie gives us is no. You would be just as stupid, because he tells them nobody ever tries breaking the first floor windows, right? And he's like, and they ask why, and he's like, I don't know, right? They always go breaking and going out the second floor, and then they're on the roof or they fall, and I got them, right? And then when they became characters in the plot, I wrote the note, is anyone gonna remember? Because we had put that gun on the wall, and nobody did. You know, we did get Kelly Curtis going out the second floor window to her death. Yeah. You know, but yeah, right, because we're the film crew, right? Like the audience is the film crew. We know all of the tricks of the slasher genre at this point. Yeah. So what would you do with that, right? And that is, I will say, something I was like a tad bit disappointed with this movie with, because it, at the second half of the movie, it has the opportunity to do something new, take us to a new place with this. And I don't think it does. I think we just up the body count a little bit, you know, like.
That's fair. That is a fair critique. The only thing I could possibly say in defense of that is that, listen, as a horror fan, and I know you're one too, so I'm sure you heard this. A lot of people will like dismiss the genre, either dismiss the genre entirely or large swaths of it by saying like, "Oh, I can't watch horror movies. The people in them are so stupid. They just keep making mistakes." And I've heard that so much. I have several ready-made responses for it. First of all, my go-to would just be, look at the world around us. Does it seem like it's populated by logical people where only logical stuff happens? Everything is dumb. Everybody's dumb. None of us know what we're doing. I don't know why you would think that in a high-stress, near-death situation that you or anybody you know is going to be like, operating at like 100% logic. Like, nah, you're going to mess up and you're going to make dumb mistakes. And then, I don't know. It's just that's my main one. But on top of it, I also just think, like, is that compelling storytelling?
Right.
Like, there's a great scene in that show Community where there's a character who like breaks down like the way to survive a horror movie. It's like two people standing in the center of the room. They're both holding knives. They have they
that's
can
a
always
Halloween
see
episode. I remember that one.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like, okay, that's a funny sketch, but you can't make that movie because if everybody's always logical and able to avoid death, then there's no stakes. Like something needs to happen in order for people to, so I feel like the movie was kind of just trying to say, it's like, hey, you think you're smarter than this stuff, but you're not.
Yeah,
like,
that's the dramatic irony I put there.
Yeah.
You get more information than the characters do. Because largely slasher films target teenagers, and teenagers, myself included at a time, like generally do dumb things.
Oh yeah.
Like, and that's what you see. Yeah. We'd often don't think it through, like you will run upstairs because you're not thinking. But yeah, there's that. I think it also puts in a feminist slant that I don't think it really takes seriously.
This is the movie where I learned the term yonic and yonic imagery. So I even said that to my wife when I was like rewatching this a couple of days ago. I was like, this is the movie that taught me what yonic imagery is.
Yep, opposite of phallic. Yeah, I did not know that, but now I do. I was like, that makes sense. Yeah. But yeah, and I think like in a lot of ways it is a defense of the genre, like in terms of the cultural significance of the battle of good versus evil. Right? Like you need antagonism in order for good to thrive and grow, but also this is about female empowerment, right? Yes. And I say this conscious of the two upskirt shots that come almost back to back.
Yeah.
When she's going up the ladder. And Cabin in the Woods isn't free from it either, but yeah, it's there, right? That's you can point it out, but you're still guilty of the thing too. You know?
That's the interesting thing about meta horror is that it really, and I'm going to try to say this phrase the way I think it should be said, which is it tries to, eat its cake and have it too. Where it wants to critique you, be like, this is maybe not the most progressive thing in these movies, but it's like, yeah, but you're still doing it, right? You're still kind of doing it, like, and other, like, obviously this isn't a film we're going to talk about, but a meta horror movie that I actually have a love-hate relationship with is Funny Games.
Oh, okay.
Versions. Yeah. In fact, we probably could have thrown that.
That would have been a good one too.
I could have gone on such a rant. But Funny Games, the big thing about that is that movie is just basically straight up horrible torture of this family by these two psycho guys for an hour and a half or something. And the thing is, Michael Haneke, the maker of that film, hates horror movies, hates violence in film. And it's not even just in that film. In a lot of his films, he basically tries to critique our love of watching violence he makes these violent films to say you're effed up for watching this. Like the characters in Funny Games, the killers actually break the fourth wall constantly to kind of like be like, hey, isn't this kind of crazy? Because they're basically trying to make you feel complicit. And it's just like, hey, I get that, but also you made the movie.
Yeah.
You you didn't have to you could have made a sweet rom-com if you wanted to, man. Yeah. But you made this.
Right.
Like, so we're both evil here.
No, I hear you. No, and that's I think that's fair. And like with that said, I think Cabin in the Woods is right up that alley with that as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, Cabin in the Woods comes out a few years later. I believe it's 2012.
It was in release hell for a little while, if I remember correctly, because that was filmed in like
before Thor, and before one of the other Chris Hemsworth movies, but came out after them.
Chris Hemsworth had some rough luck pre-Thor, man. Yeah. There was that in the Red Dawn remake.
Yeah, Red Dawn. That's the other one.
Yeah. But for whatever reason, Cabin in the Woods was having some issue getting distributed, even though it's like.
Actually,
directed,
both these movies did,
yeah. And does Joss Whedon direct, or is it Drew Goddard who directs?
Goddard directs. Whedon wrote.
Yeah, okay.
Or both wrote, but yeah.
Because Goddard got his start on Buffy in the later seasons, and he also, I believe, was the co-writer on like Cloverfield, which found footage. I love that movie. And yeah, so it was them together. Like that's a heavyweight genre writing and directing team, and yet for some reason the film kind of languished for a little bit before thankfully finally coming out, I guess around 2012.
Yeah.
Which was good timing because for those who have seen the film, you know there's some kind of heavy apocalyptic vibes, especially towards the end of the movie.
Yeah.
And that, if anybody remembers, 2012 was the year where, for some reason in pop culture, we all, I don't know, some crap about the Mayan calendar not going past 2012, and they were like, "Oh, the world's gonna end."
Maybe they took a break. They were
Maybe
like,
they
"We
took
got
a
it
break.
planned out enough." But yeah, I tell my students all
Also,
the time.
maybe colonialism did something, and they weren't around to put 2013 on. You know,
Yeah, it's
like
possible. I tell my students I've lived through like 4 apocalypses, so like they're
isn't that a
probably
Witcher
gonna be
quote or
okay.
something?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, Cabin in the Woods, is 2 movies until it's 1 movie, right? You got parallel plot lines playing out about a group of college students,
Yes,
going
college
off
kids,
on
yeah.
a weekend, retreat to a character's cousin's cabin, right? And it's Chris Hemsworth's character's cousin. That's hard to say.
Yeah.
But Chris's character's cousin, yeah. And the other plot line, and that's very conventional slasher movie stuff, right? Cabin in the Woods, we think of Evil Dead and stuff like that, and a ton of other films. But then the other is about this bureaucratic, office people thing, doing something.
And it starts with them. It starts
Yeah.
with those guys, the 2 main agents or main workers in the place, kind of like riding through the complex on a golf cart. I actually read somewhere that Joss Whedon and Drew Goddard, they specifically start the movie with one of those scenes because they wanted to make people in the audience worry for a second that they walked into the wrong movie.
Yeah, the title card is a jump scare.
Yeah,
right?
it's really good. It got me the
One
first
of the
time.
characters is like, "Are you even listening to me?" Because he's rattling off
Yeah.
something about, and his words, right, women problems or women issues.
They got to put safety locks on the stuff for the kids.
Yeah,
in the
right.
house,
And he's like, "Are you even listening to me?" And then you get a screech and the title card, and it's an effective jump scare. And then we see the movie that you're expecting. Basically, the scenarios from the slasher movies that, we all know and love are largely ritualistic sacrifices to some kind of Lovecraftian elder god, perhaps, that's old and slumbers and we need to keep appeased. And this has a long history of, throwing people in volcanoes and human sacrifice. And what we do is we need to punish teenagers for their ignorance and youth. And we
their
kind of
transgressions against some moral code.
So you see the slasher movie play out through that lens, right? And then you see the characters push back a little bit, try to take empowerment into their own hands, agency, and they go and visit, this corporate side, right? And and
the way the third act completely breaks down in the best way possible is it's still one of my favorite kind of sequences in a film ever, really. What I love so much about Cabin in the Woods is that you can watch the movie literally and be very invested, but then also, especially if you're a huge horror fan and you're watching it for that meta horror goodness, you're very quick to realize that the entire thing is a metaphor. It's an allegory. The film is an allegory.
Yeah, it's a great
for
allegory.
making horror films. The corporate entities that are making this saga, these are the filmmakers. This is the committee of people who go behind making all the horror movies we love. The elder gods are us, the audience, and if we don't see those proper tropes, those proper little things happen that we always come to those movies for, we get angry and we reject the movie. And that is for a filmmaker the end of the world if this thing you put all your time and heart and energy into gets rejected. And it's just so beautiful in that way that it just becomes a perfect summation of the filmmaking process. And, it's like there's something in it for filmmakers and there's something in it for film watchers because, you're watching and you're seeing these characters who from the get-go, we realize they don't fit into any of the tropes. There's Chris Hemsworth character, his girlfriend is a very bubbly blonde girl, but she's also very smart and very sweet and nice. But then they literally, and the same thing with our lead character, who we find out is, she's a sexually active woman.
Yeah, her introduction is she had an affair with her professor, right?
Yes.
And that has ended. But
exactly,
that's our
but she's not
interaction
an
to her.
innocent person.
Yeah.
She's no like little lost lamb in the woods. And our stoner character is the one character who, when the forces that be are chemically altering things and influencing things, ironically, his healthy use of cannabis is the thing that numbs him out
Yeah.
and from those effects, and actually makes him able to say, wait a minute, something weird is going on here. My favorite line to this day in the whole movie is him being like, all right, I'm drawing in a line in the sand. Do not read the Latin.
Yeah. Yep.
Like,
I draw it there.
Yeah. He's tried so hard. And also the moment where they meet in the elevator and he just like, you see the remains of one of the redneck zombies that he had to beat to pieces.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, I had to kill that guy. Takes a deep breath, looks over her. What have you been up to?
And like that zombie hand comes back where it helps them get out of the situation when the guards come in, and he thanks the zombie hand before he leaves. Yeah, so like the stoner character, like usually the stupidest of them all, the biggest joke, the fool, as they call his archetype, is the voice of reason in this film, right? So like that definitely, says something, right? Like about drug use and things like that, but also what we often call, stupidity or craziness, right? Like sometimes there is logic to it that other people perhaps can't see.
Yeah.
I remember taking notes on the scene on the dock where Mr. Buckner is attacking. Now her name escapes us, but our final girl.
Yes.
It's on the tip of my tongue. All right, whatever. Becky? No, whatever.
I will just keep
and
going.
And we get music, and the camera pulls back. And I'm like, all right, so if this is any other like horror film, slasher film, this is where we end.
Dana, I believe.
Dana, thank you. Dana, Marty, Jules? I don't know.
Yep. Yeah, no, you're getting them.
And then Hemsworth, I don't know.
Also, going to just real quick aside about Marty, I love the actor's name is one of my favorite names of all time. Fran Kranz.
Yeah, he's got a good one.
What a name.
And apparently he was in really good shape, so they had to like put him in baggy costumes and stuff like that.
Yeah, he was actually a pretty fit dude. I remember. Also, sorry, fun little side note real quick. This is me nerding out. If you watch the special features on the Blu-ray, if you're a nerd like me who still collects discs, you'll find out that Heather Langenkamp, one of the original final girls from Nightmare on Elm Street, she worked as a makeup effects assistant on this movie because she's married to, in real life, like an actual effects wizard. And they work as a husband and wife team nowadays on lots of horror films, and Cabin in the Woods was kind of one of their big successes. So it was just so funny. I was watching going through the special features, and I just see her pop up being like, so this is how we did the unicorn effect and yada yada, and like this is how we green screened out the actor's legs to make the werewolf legs. And I'm like, how did Nancy get here? What's going on?
No, that's great.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to do that.
No. But so like traditional slasher movie, like when she's being attacked on the dock and the camera's pulling back, that's the end of the movie. Right? We don't let you know whether she lives or dies. We end there, fine. Right? But this movie keeps going. We find Marty, he's alive. We go into the elevator. We see all those boxes with full of Easter eggs, just like the basement's been, right? Another movie would end there, right? Like Cube, right? Like, oh, you got to another place you don't know.
Yeah.
Right? Let's stop. And this movie keeps going, right? And it becomes like, we got to do the sacrifice to save the world. And maybe the world doesn't need to be saved. And it's condemning. It's a love letter to horror, no doubt, right? But on some level, it's condemning the current state of horror at the time and the quality of films that we're producing.
It's begging for a rebirth.
Yeah, right? Like something new, right? Like, because maybe humanity's had its chance, like Marty says, and we need something new.
He says in that even early on in the movie when they're still kind of in the Winnebago heading up and they're talking and like the one somebody like says to Marty, it's like, oh, is society crumbling, Marty? He goes, no, society's filling in the cracks with concrete. The world needs to end. We're all just too scared to let it, And I again, going to it being an allegory for horror filmmaking in particular, he's trying to say we need to let these old tired tropes that don't really reflect our world die, and we need to come up with something new. And to be honest, if you look at horror nowadays, I mean, yes, there's still lots of throwback movies and lots of movies that are kind of that play on those tropes or hearken to them. But at the end of the day, they're trying to. We got to wrap up. Okay. Horror has gone into a newer space now. A lot of these old tropes from these slasher movies in the 80s, you're not seeing reflected anymore. We're trying to evolve. And I think Cabin in the Woods actually came out in a timely place, kind of only a few years shy before you started to see horror in a very mainstream way start pushing itself in new directions, in more introspective and emotionally charged directions.
Yeah, I think like It Follows. I think like
100%.
Midsommar, right? Like
Yep.
you know, like
Yep.
we're different kinds of movies. Midsommar is so bright and colorful, right? But it's scary.
I know now we're kind of almost starting to see a backlash of like what everybody calls trauma porn, and I get it. You know, when the upteen horror movie you've seen is about like trauma, you get tired of it. But like, I do think that the It Follows and the Midsommars and the what was the first one Ari Aster did? The Hereditaries of the scene.
That's another one. Yeah,
I think those pushed the genre
Witch.
in a very good direction. I think those were very healthy for the genre. I really do.
Yeah, and it's a pendulum. It swings. You know, it oscillates. Right.
Yeah.
This stuff is constant flux.
We're getting lots of slasher movies now.
Yeah, I will say that that what you're talking about is what made Cabin in the Woods a little superior to Behind the Mask for me, because I think Cabin in the Woods said something new, right?
Yeah.
Where like Behind the Mask was trying, maybe it could have got there, but I have to squint and turn my head too much to see it.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
like. But yeah, I think they both say something about our fascination with this stuff, right? About how used to it and second nature this has become, not just in film, but our own society, right? Like, killers are fascinating. Think how many documentaries are out there.
Yeah.
Think about the Bundy Netflix show last year, you know? Like it is something that people are fixated and fascinated with in our culture. And I don't know if that's a good thing, right? Because Behind the Mask, those grad students following Leslie around, right? I could see that with like school shooters, right? I want to be the next school shooter. This serves a significance, and like people just eating it up for ratings or something, and that worries me. Yeah. But yeah, all right. Last thought, Chris.
I was about to say, aren't you a teacher?
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Last thoughts. So yeah, I think these two films are great examples of meta horror. If you haven't seen them and us talking about their plot points hasn't spoiled them, I really highly recommend checking out Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon. Check out Cabin in the Woods. Also, for additional reading, check out either version of Funny Games, because the American remake is a shot for shot, but also try to find the original from '97 too.
Anything by Ari Aster.
Also, there's proto ones that go even for Jason. Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives, is a very early attempt of like the meta horror like thing from the 80s. You don't even really need to have seen any of the other Friday the 13th to get it. Just watch it. It's super fun. It takes a lot of shots at the slasher genre at the time.
New Nightmare,
also a great example of meta horror.
Meta, right? Scream, obviously.
Scream, of course. Like there's lots of stuff to dig into. Even more recently, there was a remake, a Sci-Fi Channel remake of Slumber Party Massacre that was meta and fun. It really actually did a good job of like critiquing the genre, but also be like, hey, but yeah, we're having fun with it too. So check out those movies to expand your palette on meta horror, and just have fun watching movies and let them reflect on them. Let them maybe think about you as an audience member and how you're participating in it.
Sounds good. Well, thanks for listening, everyone. This has been Real Reflections, Cinema Societal
Mirror.
I'm Kevin.
I'm Chris.
And keep watching those movies.
Keep watching. Keep listening to us talk about them.
That's right. We'll get that catchphrase eventually.
Sooner or later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.